Good afternoon. I'm going to start the last chapter in Biology 102 entitled Extinction and define the term, talk about some reasons for extinction, human caused extinction, and talk about some of the reasons for, in particular, mass extinctions, large die offs of different organisms here on Earth at different times in the geologic history of Earth. So let's start out with the definition. I believe we covered this term and introduced it in the second lab on fossils and the fossil record. When every member of either a species or a group of species, if you will, some of the dinosaurs, some of the groups of dinosaurs, as an example of a group of taxa. When the last individual has passed, that is referred to as the extinction of either that species or group. Some of the reasons given for extinction is habitat loss, poor reproductive rate, being outcompeted by another individual, or lacking the ability to adapt to a rapidly changing environment. The average time that a species usually lives on Earth before it goes extinct is approximately 10 million years. And this estimate of 10 million years is based off of fossils from the fossil record. We consider extinction to be a natural phenomenon, just like erosion and just like climate change. The estimate is that almost all organisms that have ever lived on Earth are extinct. Many of them are represented by fossils, others are not. Perhaps even others have not been found. We do consider that humans cause extinction and have caused several hundred, as far as we know, perhaps many more organisms to go extinct in the past 10 to 15,000 years. So we consider extinction, as we do climate change, to be natural events. We tend to think of ourselves as humans as being able to increase the rate of such events, such as we consider climate change to be accelerated by human activity. We also consider that the extinction rate can be accelerated as well. And overall, extinction rate in the past 10 to 15,000 years has greatly increased and has been referred to as a sixth mass extinction, referred to as the Holocene extinction event. And the Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson has estimated that perhaps 1/4 to 1/2 of all species here on Earth may go extinct by the end of this century. The bird on the right that is considered to be extinct at present time is called the ivory-billed woodpecker. On the previous slide, there was a picture of a bird called the passenger pigeon that both have gone extinct in the last century. At some point in time during the 1900s, the last individual was seen and has not been seen since. There are some organisms that seem to have survived every major catastrophe that has occurred in their evolutionary history, and they have actually been present on Earth and are known from fossils from hundreds of millions of years ago, and they're actually known from living specimens here at present, and they're called living fossils. They're fairly, I think the right word to say is they're fairly distinct, and they have very few close living relatives. They're usually the only members of their group, such as the coelacanth, a type of bony fin fish, the horseshoe crab, which is not related to crabs like the blue crab. It's actually more of a relative of a spider, an arachnid, and the ginkgo. The ginkgo is a tree that's somewhat related to conifers like pine trees. So it's really not known how these particular organisms have survived several 100 million years of existence on Earth without actually going extinct. The coelacanth was thought to be extinct. It was found, I believe, in the Indian Ocean in the late 1930s. It is a very primitive type of fish in that it has in its fins, it has bones just like we have in our arm. Unlike most fish that have ray-like bones and ray-like fins, and I'm referring to the pectoral fins located on either side of the gill flaps or opercula. The horseshoe crab is shown up in the top right, and it is more of a relative of a spider than it is a true crab or an arthropod in that regard, a crustacean. So the horseshoe crab is noted for its antibiotic-rich blue blood. So extinction is considered natural. It's considered to occur at a fairly low constant rate in the lack of environmental change. Two scientists that we've talked of before, Robert MacArthur and E.O. Wilson, came up with a concept that they applied to islands, referred to as island biogeography theory. And their model was basically based on three different components. Immigration, which was the movement of propagules, the movement of species into an island. So a species would colonize an island. Extinction is the loss of species from an island. And equilibrium is that point where immigration rate and extinction rate were the same. And if you were to drop a line at the equilibrium point, that would denote the number of species that could potentially be found on an island. They then added a couple more variables to their model, which were: what was the size of an island? Was it small or large? And how far from a mainland source of species was the island? Was it near to the mainland or far away? The further away from a continent or mainland and the smaller the island, the fewer species were likely on that island. The nearer an island to a mainland and the larger the island, the more diversity of species that island would probably have. So, immigration and extinction play important roles in the diversity of species that are found on islands. Let me explain these particular graphs. The number of bird species tends to show a decrease with the distance away from the mainland. So this is number of bird species on islands based upon their distance from the mainland source where birds could fly and colonize the island. Okay. The lower left figure is number of species of reptiles and amphibians on the Caribbean islands based on the size of the island. The number of amphibians and reptiles increases in a linear fashion as the size of the island increases. The last figure in the lower right shows that the closer an island is to the mainland, the higher number of plant species possible. The further away, you have fewer species, and you have the least amount of diversity if the island is small in size. Island biogeography has been applied to conserving land because humans have fragmented land in such a way that parcels of forest are often very similar to islands. You have a parcel of forest, and then it is surrounded by an island, say, of agricultural fields. So island biogeography is actually used in conservation quite commonly today. Two scientists in 1982 published a paper, Jack Sepkoski and David Ropp, and they identified 5 mass extinctions since the Cambrian explosion, in which at least 50% or even more of animal species, primarily marine animals, went extinct within a fairly narrow geologic time frame. So, starting at the Precambrian explosion and then moving forward within the fossil record, they identified mass extinctions that occurred at the end of the Ordovician period, at the end of the Devonian period, at the end of the Permian and the beginning of the Triassic period, at the end of the Triassic, and at the end of the Cretaceous and beginning of the Tertiary period. And you see those big bumps, if you will, or increases in extinction rate that are shown on this chart in orange. You can see and you might notice that extinction rate is constant, and then all of a sudden you get this big increase, and then it goes back to constant, then big increase, constant increase, then a little constant time there, and then increase, constant increase. So those are the 5 most major extinction events that have occurred since a major radiation of different animal groups called the Cambrian explosion. We talked about that in, I believe, Chapter 2 with Charles Walcott and all the fossils that he found up in Vancouver, I believe, British Columbia, Canada, up in the Rocky Mountains. So, in the next video, we're going to talk about these mass extinction events and what are some of the environmental changes that occurred to cause them. I will talk to you soon. Thank y'all, and goodbye.